safe space. We ain't never give a reason you should hide. Compile all your questions, we're taking the quest. Join Tarsha on this journey to discover the rest. Go.
Welcome to the Adoption Journey podcast. I am your host, Tarsha Smith, and welcome back to another week with another amazing story. Before I forget, please don't forget to go over to Patreon and check us out over there. You'll get all things Tarsha, the extreme hip hop, plant-based, and some goodies with the podcast. So don't forget to check me out on Patreon. Today in the building, we have Monica Hall. She is a fellow adoptee and a birth mom. Hey, Monica.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I can't wait to hear your story. So I'm going to dive right in. I have two favorite first questions now. Number one, the first question is, are you a transracial adoptee or same race adoptee?
You know, that's a really good question. And it's something that I've been tackling on my own here. So I don't know how to answer that, but I'll tell you why. So
okay.
I was adopted out of Canada. Many years later, when I found my birth family, my granny told me that I had a full head of dark hair, but I presented as white because it was all fallen out by the time I was adopted. So this was part of the 60s scoop in Canada, where they would take Indigenous babies out of Indigenous homes and place them in white families, which was my case. I just turned out looking white, like my birth mother. So my birth father and my birth mother are both Cree, mixed, with French and a few other things. My birth mother's father was English, so he was light, but her 6 brothers were darker. She was light with light hair when she was little and blue eyes. And then as she got older, it became dark brown, but she had blue eyes. And she was like, if you look at pictures of in like early, years with all the cousins and everything, she's the blonde white kid in a sea of dark heads. I turned out, my father's Indigenous as well, dark, and all of my siblings, but I turned out like my mother. However, I have dark hair.
So I want to pull you back just a moment, just for the family.
So what is that?
Can you explain, because I know what it is, but most people might not know what it is, when you said the scoop era. Can you explain what that is?
So in the U.S., they called it the 60s scoop, where they would just scoop all these babies out of homes and put them in adoption, from birth mothers. In Canada, it was different. In Canada, it was specifically, it was for, adoption was for profit, whatever, but it was out of Indigenous homes. So there's a lot of people right now trying to get their identity back, their status back, because they lost their Indigenous status. They lost everything. And so It's a big deal in Canada. We don't hear about it in the United States so much. I'm Métis, and nobody really understands. Well, some people do in the United States what Métis is, but it's a French word for half-breed. So the Métis ended up being no men. They weren't white, they weren't Indigenous, they were dark, but they were the lowest social level. And many of them were put in residential homes. We lost our, I didn't know when I met my birth father years later that he could speak Cree. Like, he was so ashamed. When he got off the plane to meet me, he was, hunched over and, apologizing for his color. And so I don't know what I would call myself. I don't feel like and that's an internal struggle I'm having. I'm Indigenous. I feel Indigenous in every part of my body, but I don't look it, and I never suffered prejudice like my family. So I just never did. I look white, I didn't. White privilege here. I didn't have any of that they did, and my sister and my dad and all the stuff I've heard and witnessed, I didn't experience. So it's confusing. I don't know if that's not really transracial because I look white, but my DNA definitely shows.
Yeah, I think it would be based on what your DNA is, and so we're gonna say yes, transracial. And how old were you when you found out that you were adopted?
Told, as a bedtime story. So I've always
Okay, so
known.
you've always known.
I
Okay,
was,
so that was
other mother loved me so much. Your other mother loved you so much that she wanted you to have a mommy and a daddy. She was
huh.
selfless.
Okay,
Oh,
okay. How did that make you feel growing up, hearing this all the time? Is that something that
it's weird. I thought it was kind of cool. My brother and I were both adopted. He's very, very white. We're not
okay.
related. He's French. Um, and I've got some French too. I'm mostly Indigenous, but he, we would joke around with our friends like we're adopted, and they're like, "Well, we wish we were," and that. So it was kind of a parlor trick, you know. And I didn't, but I did start feeling. In second grade is when there was an issue where I knew I was different, and I always knew I was different.
How
I
so?
don't think I really thought about my birth mother a lot. I knew that I had other parents out there somewhere, which is a weird feeling. But when I think it was second grade, they must have had
Mhm.
a census. It was some paper that we had to fill in with a number two pencil back in the olden days. This was
Mhm.
olden days, and
We had to bubble in the circle.
yeah, that, and and it was like super important, and we'd never taken a test like that, and I wanted to get it right. And this is when I still cared, what people thought of me, and well, I still do, but really, when I was little, was trying
Mhm.
to please people, and the, the questions did not apply to me. There was not a question that applied to me, like, are you living with your real parents kind of questions. That's just how I heard it in my head. There wasn't, they were my real parents, but they were not
Right.
my real parents, but they were my real
Uh-huh.
parents. And I couldn't answer it. I didn't understand. I went home and told my mom, and my dad came home and she told him, and he got really upset, probably because of the privacy issues and probably because I was confused. Maybe not. I don't know. But I took it in second grade as the error of my being. There was something wrong with me. I wasn't like the other kids. I caused problems for my family. My dad marched into school the next day and made a huge ruckus. And that was when I started just tanking. I think my grades went down. I had I was
Oh my
doing really
gosh, and you're
well
only in the
reading.
second grade.
And even prior to that, I had trouble. Like, I remember in first grade, um, when we started learning to write our numbers, I had trouble transitioning from like 19 to 20 or 10 to 11. And I remember my dad would just get frustrated with me. And in kindergarten, they'd had my IQ tested because they thought I was bright. And I guess it showed that I was bright. But my frontal lobe would shut down when I got afraid that I wasn't going to be able to get it, or I was going to be disappointing them. And
Mhm.
it would just shut down. Like, I could still feel it shut down when if I have to do math, which is horrifying. I hate math. But yeah, so I had, and then my mom, she got frustrated with me. She didn't have any patience. And I felt stupid. I felt stupid. I had a really low
Hmm.
self-esteem through elementary school and on on
So
forward.
once you started feeling, especially after that incident in the second grade, did you feel out of place in your own family, like when you were at home?
I always felt like an alien, pretty much.
Hmm.
I wasn't like my parents, and I don't know that I cared to be. Um,
Okay.
I called my father daddy back then, and I think I was more like him, probably a little narcissist. My dad was in sales. Um, I didn't realize that he was as sensitive as he was, but I was just a strong little kid. I was a tomboy. I I was strong. I beat up boys. I was that kid, but my brother was super sensitive, and my mom favored him when we got him. So I was 4 months old when I was 3.5 or 4 months when I was adopted. So I was in a
Okay.
foster home for a while with 10 other babies. My mom said that when we took me home, I was a happy baby. And I was always pictures, I'm, you know, running around or, you know, holding my head up high. And then when we got my brother when I was 3, all that attention left me and went to my brother because he was really sensitive and high need. And
And was he a
that was
baby
probably,
also?
yeah, he was only 3 weeks old, and he may
Okay,
have had
tiny baby.
failure to thrive syndrome because he was skinny and gangly and his eyeballs were poking out, belly button was poking out, and he looked like an alien. And I resented that little baby. And then she had to fatten him up, and he was probably had failure to thrive syndrome. I'm thinking, you know, because he needed more attention, and my mom didn't think I needed it, so I felt abandoned, really. And then it never ended. You know, my
And then,
mom favored my brother all the way until she died at 94. He lived with her. He never moved out. And I escaped that family at 21. I got the hell out of there.
okay, I'm sorry. You said he never moved out?
Nope. He
Huh.
never really launched. He never got a job. He didn't know how to go to DMV on his own or pay a bill or anything, nothing. And, you know, when my father died, when I was 19, he was about 16. My mom made him her husband, and it was just super dysfunctional.
Mm.
And then you know, he was super sensitive, and she was an artist and sensitive, and they was perfect match made in heaven.
It's gonna be sensitive together. So
I'm not sensitive, okay? So, I mean, my
I'm
heart
picking
goes
up
out
on
to.
that. I'm picking
I
up on
mean,
that.
I mean, I am so grateful I'm not. I
Yeah.
mean, I think God made me this way, or whatever it was made me this way, because so I could survive the trauma and the tragedy that I've had to go through in these years.
These
It was horrific things that happened, and I'd have probably offed myself, you know, years ago if I was sensitive, and I just push it down. Let's move on. Let's go. Let's push it down. And you know,
Okay,
I
so
finished my
we
memoir. That was rough.
we got to get there. You got to slow walk me. Okay, so we're going through school. You're feeling like an alien, and in the back of your mind, like you said, like especially for those of us that grew up knowing that we were adopted, we always know there's somebody out there, there's family out there, there's parents out there. Like we know that. At what point do you decide I'm going to go look for these people? What triggers this decision?
When I got pregnant.
Huh. Okay. That
I
makes
mean, I think
sense.
that's when I really, really. I always wondered about my mom, my birth
Hmm.
mom. I don't think I thought much about my birth father.
Let
I
me ask you a
wondered.
quick question. How much information did you have about them? Did you know anything?
I did not know. I knew nothing until I was 15. I knew nothing. I just assumed my parents didn't know anything because they never said anything about them. So I just assumed there was no information until I was
And what
15.
changed at 15?
I got pregnant.
Oh, at 15. Oh, all
Yeah.
right. And there it is. And there it is. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Okay.
you know, you've got it. And and we're Catholic, super strict
Oh,
Catholic, and you give your baby away if you're
yeah.
Catholic.
Right. Yeah.
So,
So tell me about that. 15, Catholic family,
so let me just
pregnant.
back up a little bit.
Back
So,
up. Yeah.
I'll back up a little bit. So, um, I painted a picture of my family. My father was abusive, verbally abusive to my brother.
Mm,
He put him down every second. He was horribly jealous of him. I didn't realize he was jealous type, but he favored me. Years later, my mom said, "I said, why didn't you rescue your little brother out of that orphanage?" And she said, "Because Daddy was jealous. He was jealous of my mother. He was jealous of my brother. He was jealous of Tim. He was jealous of everyone I loved except you. And, I knew that there was something weird about my dad. I always felt creepy around him. And like I said, I repressed a lot. And so there was some incidences that happened. One was when I was 11. Another was when I was 13 and then 14, all with my father. And there was no physical sexual abuse, but one was, the first one was, told me some horrible things when I was 11. I went out to lunch with him, and I thought, I didn't understand for years why he would say such a thing to me. And then at 13, he raged at me in a car ride when he thought I was going to be making out with boys and things. And it was, that was probably the breaking point of Monica. Like, it was the most traumatic thing. And I've been through a lot of trauma that I went through. And that's what changed the trajectory of everything. Because if you remember, I didn't do well in school. I didn't fit in with the cool kids, the latchkey kids. My mom was super overprotective. I couldn't go anywhere. And then when that raging happened with my dad, there was something that clicked in me. And I guess my survival strategy was, well, I can't be good in school. I can't hang out with the cool kids. I'm just going to be really bad. And so that was, I just became the worst juvenile delinquent I could be.
You just went and did anything and everything that you were big and bad enough to do.
Yeah. Like beating people up. I was a bully. I broke into houses. I did all the drugs of the 70s. I rode in stolen cars. I vandalized. God, I did just a lot. In fact, on Facebook, I posted maybe a picture or something of my book. And a lot of people that follow me, because I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, I don't know them. Some of them I know from school. And one said, does it entail beatings and bullying? And I'm like, I bet I beat that girl up, and I don't even know who she is. Yeah. And I said, I answered it. I said, yeah, I tell all. And I think that's part of the reason I needed to write, because I needed to understand why I was such an asshole.
Writing is therapeutic for sure. But I
need to figure it out. Like, why was I so bad? Why did I hurt all those people? What the hell? And it wasn't until I could see, when you lay out your life and you look at all the stuff that you wouldn't look at, when, all that trauma and all that crap that happened at home, the stuff that I pushed down, when I really looked at it and I dug it out, and I had a developmental editor who would, show me, not tell me. Will you say that you felt shame? Why did you feel shame? I mean, I had to dig all that out over the course of 7 years, and I can totally see why that girl did those things. Totally see it. Like,
and what conclusion did you come to?
It was my survival strategy. Like, I didn't, I was I was abused, like I said. At 14, my father beat me with a wire hanger, a hideous beating that some of which I repressed. My mom, sent my brother away so he wasn't traumatized by my screaming. And I repressed a lot of the memories. I repressed until I was writing, and I called my girlfriend in Alaska, and I said, do you remember when I got beat by that wire hanger? Because she was a year younger than me, and I don't remember ever showing anybody, or I didn't remember more than the thighs, those hideous scars on my thighs. And she screamed at me through the phone, and she's very reserved. And she said, yes, I saw them. And I'm like, saw what? She goes, you lifted up your shirt in the stall in the bathroom. Just, you wanted to know what they looked like.
I remember doing that.
No.
Yeah.
She said, it looked like you've been beaten with a cat of nine tails. Don't you have scars? Wow. And then like a year later, I called her. I go, why would I do that? And she goes, it was probably the wounds on your legs were probably thicker because of your jeans, but your shirt was a thinner material. It was probably scabbing over and sticking to your shirt. And I repressed so much. And there's so much that I was able to. So let me go back. The reason I wrote this book in the first place, it's, it's called Practically Still a Virgin, an adoption memoir. And it was originally my daughter, who's 39 now. She was pregnant with my 7-year-old grandson. So she wanted me to write a memoir. She goes, Mom, it's so fascinating. You were adopted, and then you gave up a baby for adoption, and then you found your family, and then you found Mary, and it's so fascinating. And I said, my kids were moved out, and I thought, I'd never written before. I had all these journals and all these appointment books that I'd been lugging around since 1968, since I was little. And I documented everything. And I must have intuitively known that I was going to write this, but it's not what I wanted to write. The adoption stuff wasn't what I wanted to write. The stuff I wanted to write was
But
the
it
stuff I
sounds like
needed to
that's what you
figure out.
needed to write, though. That's what you needed to
Well,
write.
actually, I've got a second book because I needed to figure out all that missing stuff,
Yeah.
all the repressed memories and things with my father that I knew things weren't right. I had reoccurring dreams, and those many of those things are in my second book. This book is a narrative. It's like reading a novel, and I have it out right now. By the time this airs, it'll be out. You'll be able to buy it. But I sent it out, art copies, advanced copies to people, and people are just texting me and calling me. I'm like, oh my god, I can't put it down, and
Yeah, I'm excited to read it.
And oh my God. This is somebody that did horrible in school. She wrote a freaking book that people like that. I can't believe,
Yeah. So I'm gonna back you up a little bit. I want to know if you could get into when you I'm losing my train of thought. You became curious at 15 when you got pregnant about your birth family. What did that look like for you going to find them, and how did your adoptive family respond to you
well,
taking this journey?
I have to back up. So,
All right.
suffice it to say, we were super religious. There was this virgin mentality in my family. I snuck out my bedroom window and I got raped as a virgin at 15. So
Okay.
when I became pregnant, it was lock you in the house. You don't go to school when you're pregnant. You give your baby away. We take you to the nun, and she'll find baby. She's your counselor, and then she'll find family for you. And so during that time that I was isolated, and I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska during the oil boom years, and like wintertime is dark. It's the shortest day is 5 hours, so it's dark. People hunker down. Nobody came to visit me. I was so depressed and lonely. And of course, my mom had gotten me a journal to write in. And I started thinking about my mom, my birth mom. Like, how did she do this? Like, what did she look like? I know I must look like her. Is my baby going to look like me? How did she do this? Because I was told that she was selfless and I had such low self-worth, I didn't feel worthy. How could I be selfish when she wasn't? And it wasn't like I had a choice about relinquishing. So my mother,
Right.
I was at a pregnant girls school, and I went a couple days a week, and the state adoption agency came and spoke to us. And afterwards I went up to her and I said, I'm adopted. I don't know anything. I don't think my parents know anything about my family. Went home and told my mom, and she started crying. And she said, actually, there's some papers in the safety deposit box with your real name on it. And oh my gosh, I tried to look calm. I tried not to jump up and down and scream and yell and, oh my God, because I wondered about my mother, So she brought those home, and I had non-identifying information. So I knew that my mother was Irish. Of course, the Indigenous was removed. My father was French, Indigenous removed. She had 6 brothers and no sisters. She had auburn hair and blue eyes. She liked to sew, make her own clothes. She was Catholic. My father liked the usual sports. So it was all non-identifying. But what I knew is she had 6 brothers, and my name was on there. So my adoptive name, the name my parents named me, is Mary Monica Hall. She'd named me, and I thought maybe she named me after herself, Gloria Deborah Reed. So when I had my baby, I named her after me, thinking it might be easier for her to find me if we had the same name, because that's the only thing I hung on to, is being able to meet her someday.
Uh-oh.
And it wasn't until I was 23.
Okay.
I was out of the house at 21. I turned into an alcoholic, drugs and alcohol. And I had a brief stint with liver disease as a result of binge drinking from 19 to 21. And I ended up turning yellow and got really sick. So I stopped for a couple of years, picked it back up after I found my family. And at 23, I searched through Adoptee Liberty Movement Association. And that was all there was back then. This was 1980. Right. So there was no, obviously, internet. It was all writing letters.
I want to point out that not only were you a product of the baby scoop era, but then you got pregnant and also your daughter became a product of the baby scoop era as well. Wow. Wow. Wow, wow.
So I did the search, and it took me 3 months. And I'm tenacious. When I sink my teeth into something, and I wrote letters, and I finally got a hold of my uncle in Edmonton, which is where I was born. I didn't know the hospital. I just had my name. And I talked to him for the first time. And I knew I was talking to my uncle, and he told me my mom died. So I never got to meet her. And,
did you get to see pictures of her?
Yeah. I mean, I did the only way that I could get to know my mom was through stories. And I eventually went to Canada and met my family, and she died at 30. So she was very young. I was only 7. And I believe I understand why she relinquished me. And, it's like trying to figure all that out. But it's so interesting. I never resented my birth mother. I never had anger at her. I just
get that. I get
none.
that. That's my story. Yeah, I was never angry either. Yeah, I get that. And I can't explain it either, but I was never angry. For what?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I always thought, maybe it's interesting you say that, because I always thought maybe it was because I relinquished and I knew how much I love my baby.
I don't know. Everybody's so different. For me, I always took it as I had a great life. As I've said on this podcast many times, I was living my best life. So what am I mad about? What am I angry about? I just wasn't mad. Still not mad, because at this point I found both sides and still not angry. For what? But I know everybody's different and everybody's story is different. I don't know.
This is for my family, like my adoptive family, who I still love. My mom's deceased. She died 4 years ago. My brother's now living with me. And he's got his act together. He's working. He figured out how to do all the grown-up stuff on his own, because I ain't going to help him, but he couldn't stay in that house. It was, and he was a meth addict for 15 years, and he got clean 2 years before she died. So I never thought in a million years I would live with my brother. It was my worst nightmare. And it's basically been the best thing, It's turned out to be so good. I mean, he went to the store just now and got me printer ink for my printer. I mean,
okay, listen, we'll take it. We will take it.
It's you never know. You never know how things are going to turn out.
You sure
can't
don't
write your history. You just kind of got to write it out.
You just got to write it out. So, okay, so you found your birth family. You learn about your mother, and do you find your paternal side as well?
Absolutely. So I talked to my uncle, my mom's brother, and I asked him who my father was, and told him what it said on the papers, that he worked for the railroad and that he was French, and he insisted that was not my father. I had told him what I looked like, and he said, he can't be your father. He's black. He's black. I mean, he's black. And I'm like, what do you mean? And that's what
Wow.
they called Indigenous people that were dark. So I was not, I, I, I said, well, it's got to be my father. That's what she put on the papers. And he came and he met me at the airport. And then they interviewed us at my house, and they're on my website, the interview. God, it's really scratchy because I took it off of VHS, but
Okay.
you can hear his lips sticking to his tongue. He had cotton mouth. He was terrified. Like I'm an extrovert. He was such an introvert. And he saw the cameras and he just cringed getting off the plane,
Uh,
because the news contacted Alma and they said they wanted to film some reunions. They said, well, we got one coming up. And so that's how that happened. And
so
he
did you
was,
ever take a DNA test?
oh, yeah, you
Okay.
betcha. Yeah.
Okay.
And I look like my dad too, but and the older I get, the more I look like him. But my half sister on my dad's side, we had the exact same teeth, the exact same lips. But I didn't get that identifying thing that I needed, the geomes or whatever it is, where you see somebody that looks just like you with them, because
Uh,
they acted different than me too. They were Indigenous, super reserved. I ended up with my English grandfather's personality, high forehead, light skin, and
yeah.
all my family, my siblings were very quiet, um, and reserved, and I didn't feel the connection I did with them as I did with my uncles on my mother's side. But
Mm,
my birth father is just a wonderful man, um, and he was a good father, and he had 4 children, and all our people. What happened in Canada is these people that were part half breed or whatever, they wanted to get rid of them, and so they gave them a little bit of what they called scrip, and that was basically you got some land or some money, you could go buy homestead land way out in Edmonton, and you're no longer Indian anymore. We can get rid of you that way. And so they did that on both sides of my family. And so my mother's family settled on one side of the lake, and my father settled on the other, around Lac
okay.
St. Anne, and this is up in Alberta. And so there's a pilgrimage that happens there for it's been going on for 100 more years, and eventually that lake was supposed to be it was called Manitou Saucaheguen, which is Lake of the Spirit, and it was supposed to have healing water. And so they ended up marrying it. Of course, when the Catholics came, they called it Saint Anne. So Lac Saint Anne, and they have a pilgrimage where Indigenous people come from all over North America to be there on my birthday weekend, and that's where I saw so many family members, like all this family,
Uh-huh.
just everybody practically I'm related to. And
Wow.
I just found out that my great great auntie was she was an Indigenous historian, and she wrote about the buffalo hunts. And my great great grandmother, who was a medicine woman, and I have all this connection to family now. And
That's
my history.
amazing.
I've been an herbalist. I've been an aromatherapist. I manufactured body care. I was making medicines for people back in the 90s. All
Mm,
these things that make sense now.
it makes
Like
sense.
nobody in my
Absolutely.
family totally
Absolutely.
makes sense.
That's
My great
crazy how
grandmother
that
was a
happens.
medicine woman. Like, yeah.
That's
So,
crazy how that
um,
happens. So, okay, so you have your baby, and was that an open or a closed adoption?
oh no, it's all closed.
All closed.
Oh yeah, back in
All
1973,
closed. Oh, yeah, it was
all
close.
closed.
It was
Oh,
closed.
major
Yeah, yeah.
closed. Yeah.
It was close, major close. So, in reunion with her,
Yep. She
how did that
I
happen?
I couldn't wait until she turned 18. That was what I held on to. I finally got sober in 84. So I had been sober about 7 years when she turned 18. And
Mm-hmm.
thank goodness, I probably wouldn't have lived the way I drank. But I called the adoption agency 6 months early because I couldn't wait. So by then we'd moved to California. We moved So I grew up in Anchorage, and then we moved to California 9 months after she was born. And so I was living in California, and I called the adoption agency, and it was open in Alaska at that time. And this was 1991. And I told them that I had a child, and she was going to be 18 in 6 months. And they said, "We'll send us a letter when she turns 18, and we'll forward it to her parents, and we'll, facilitate that reunification." And okay, so I hung up 6 more months, and I would, tell all my friends I could hardly wait to meet her. She was my human, my human. I knew she was going to look like me. I knew she was going to act like me. She was going to want to find me just like I wanted to find her. And so within a couple weeks, they called and they said, "We're so sorry we haven't gotten back to you, but we have a picture here." I'm like, "A picture?" "Yes, of a young girl, your daughter." She, with her mother, had called within a couple of days, a week or so of my call, couldn't wait 6 months. So they flew her out to meet me. We've exchanged letters first. I went and got every blockbuster sad movie that I shunned for years, and sat with a box of Kleenex for weeks and just cried and cried and cried, because I never cried. I shoved it down. I shoved it down. I knew if I did, I'd die. I wouldn't survive. And so I got it all out so that when we finally had our first call, it was just for her. I knew what she wanted to ask me.
Wow.
And when she called, she didn't have to ask me anything. I just gave it all, because I knew what I would have wanted to ask my mom. It was really cool. And she's just like
her
me.
mother. And her adoptive mother was on board with that as well.
Never showed any. Yeah, she was all over it, and she was a wonderful mom. And I talked to Mary not long ago about it, and she says, "Yeah, I think there might have been some insecurity there," but she said my mom never did. And my mom, however, I did read her journals, and I remember back when I was talking about my birth father, and I was super excited in the honeymoon phase, she, said some things like, but I just pushed it off, thinking, my mom, her being so sensitive,
Yeah,
you encouraged me to search. She encouraged me to search. So, and you're my mom, you're my mom. What? You're my mom. So what's the problem? You're my mom.
Yeah, but they still have some insecurities sometimes.
Oh, super. And in that journal, in the journal, she wrote 13 pages of how she probably wouldn't have adopted me had she have known that I was going to. And she was probably just angry, but it was still hard to.
Well, she's also of that era that it was never considered that us as adoptees were going to do what we're doing today and go and find these people, in the 60s. And nobody thought that this was going to be a thing.
They also,
and we'd be around here taking random DNA tests and figuring out our lives.
Yeah. They also just, it was back then, they didn't know. And they thought it was going to be just like having your own baby, just like birthing your own baby.
And that's what they sold.
We're not.
That's what they sold.
That. And it was not the case.
Yeah,
I wasn't
absolutely
anything
not the case. Absolutely.
My mom was jealous of me. Yeah. My mom
was
jealous of me.
So you had a good relationship.
I couldn't see it until a couple of years ago, until she died. I just couldn't. I knew that she didn't treat me like my brother, and there was a number of instances of she didn't come to my daughter's wedding. She just wasn't really in my kid's life, and I just always made excuses for her. That's my friend in Alaska said, "Monica, you always make excuses for your mom." It's because she was my mom.
That was your mom.
It's like a kid that's adopted. There's got to, even though I may not have bonded with her, she was my mom. It's a really weird dynamic. As you know, you're an adoptee, and I, even though now I can see my mom's culpability in the things that happened to me, the traumas that I had. There were 11 of them. before the age of 16.
It's the difference between looking at your mom as your mom and looking at your mom as a human being. It's different. Yeah. As crazy as that sounds, it's different. It's different. So it sounds like you have a really good relationship with your daughter.
Um, I do. She and I are so much alike. They flew her out. We've been back and forth a number of times. It's not without complexities, though.
Okay. That's
My
fair.
daughter the daughter I got to keep, who's 39 now, and the daughter that I relinquished is 50. The daughter
Mhm.
I got to keep, they fight like sisters, and I think there's some sibling rivalry.
Mhm.
Anyway, you know what I mean. With
Yeah,
my
sibling
oldest daughter,
rivalry.
because I didn't keep her. I kept the other
Mm.
one, and
But she knows the
but
story and why you didn't keep her,
oh
right?
yeah, I
Yeah.
wrote the damn book for her. Yes, she's
Yeah.
read my she's read my journals. We are very transparent. She and I are very
That's
much alike.
amazing.
She's also recovered alcoholic, and so is my other daughter. So genetics so strong. My
Genetics
grandfather,
strong.
yeah, my English grandfather was a drunk. So,
Wow.
but we all got sober. So that's huge. And I was an example of to them for that. So
I want to
it'll be,
commend you for being so open as the birth mom, because sometimes I know this is my story, my birth mom, not open at all. The what I know I've had to figure out on my own through DNA tests, through stories from others. Um, she is either doesn't remember or just it's just a hard place for her, but the outcome is the same. I don't. There's not a lot of. I can't get a lot out of her.
part of me that really angers me because as an adoptee, we need to know. We need to know. We need to know. There's so
Yeah,
much we want to know. And it's
there's
so
so much.
important
I
to
have all
us.
the questions.
Oh,
I have
but at the
all the
same time,
questions.
yeah, but at the same time, I'm also somebody who relinquished. And I know the shame. I have it. I come from a different place because of the way I'm made. Um, but there's so much shame in back those
Mm.
days, and so many
Mm-hmm.
lies. You have to. I never told. I'm an open book. I wrote a damn book,
You
um,
wrote the book.
but not everybody is, and
Right.
it's. I mean, even just writing this narrative here, I had to dig up all that pain of relinquishing and
And
all
that's
that.
what
I
I
mean, there was
think
so much.
she's afraid of when it comes to talking to me, because you're going to have to dig up some stuff that you had buried, because number one, like I just said earlier, I was not supposed to pop back up. You were never prepared for that. And I mean, she was open arms about that, but like, what do you do with this? And then I have questions, and like you just said, digging up stuff she never intended, or at this point never intends to dig up any of that stuff. But I have figured out quite a bit on my own, though. I'm a good
It's
detective.
just so hurtful. It's so hurtful that they wouldn't, be if as an adoptee we could take these feelings and throw them in the heart of our birth mothers and say this is what it feels like society doesn't understand either, because
Mm-mm,
like I tell my
mm-mm,
girlfriends, like they don't understand what it's like to be adopted, and she goes, well, my mother left me and
mm,
blah, but yeah, but you know who your family is. You saw live with your grandmother. I had nobody that looked like me, and
right.
they just don't get it. It's like I don't know what it feels like to be a gay man because I've never been a gay man. Nobody can figure out what it feels like to be an adoptee in this
Right,
body because you're not me. And
right.
that's what's so screwed up about this, because society don't give a shit about it because they don't feel it. They don't
And they
they
don't
don't
understand
feel it.
it.
They've never had it. Yeah, and I mean, there's a book coming out. I'm reading it right now. Oh my God, it's so good. I can't put it down. It's written by an adoptee, and it's got a egg nest on the front, and it's just coming out in a month. It's I wish I could remember the name of it, but she breaks it down. She's also teaches at a college, and it's really good because I mean, nobody really cares, especially what's going on right now, with Roe versus Wade and all that stuff that's changed, because um, people want babies to fill that empty nest that, well, it'll make us okay if we have this.
Will
And
it though? Are you ready
we're
for
not,
that?
not, I just recently was on a panel on a foster care retreat for foster parents that adopted babies that through foster care. And I told my story, um, and the things that I've researched online about the adoption agencies and the adoptive parents, they're concerned about their children connecting to them. They're not concerned about their children. It's about the kids. It's not about the parents. It's about the kids. Like, put the
Concerned
birth
about
parents
the children
pictures around.
connecting to them, but not
Yes.
concerned about the kids. That you said something right
Yes.
there.
God, it's
Yeah.
just so backwards.
Yeah.
Just
You
Google some of it. Should you tell
yeah.
the birth? Don't talk bad about the birth parents to the child because they may resent you or not. No, you don't talk bad about the birth parents because they love them, or they want to be loved by them, or they
Right.
have this abandonment. I don't know. It's a thing. It's a thing.
It's definitely a thing, and that's why we
It's a
do
thing.
what we do, because society doesn't
Right.
understand this thing that really exists. There's some people that are in denial and they don't think it's a thing, but again, they're not adoptees
They're
and they don't
comfortable in their
know.
place.
They're comfortable in their place and they
During
don't know
the
what
lockdown, a lot
this
of people
is.
wrote. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's videos coming out, there's movies coming out, there's things, and trying to get Hollywood, there's a lot of adoption going on in Hollywood. So, trying to get some money behind
Hmm.
the answers here are the real, you know, what's really going on is going to be
Right.
a little difficult. But I, there's books that have been written because people were locked down, and some of them are so good, so good. Mine reads like a novel,
I
but
was just
there's
getting ready to
others
say
that
it's a
give more
great
information.
segue into you telling us a little bit about your book, because by the
It's
time this airs, you'll be able to buy it. So
yes,
good.
yes. It's the name of it's Practically Still a Virgin, and I've had people go,
Practically
"What?" And I'm
still a
like,
virgin.
"Practically Still a Virgin." When you read it, you'll go, "Oh." It threads everything together, and
Okay.
there's spoilers, there's surprises, because I wrote this starting from my adoption, but all
Hmm.
the way up into present day, and all these things I was discovering, and you discover these with me along the way. And like I said, I just got a text from somebody else that said, "Oh my gosh, da 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 da!" Like, wait, there's more. It's they can't put it
Yeah.
down, and it's great because it gives the perspective without teaching you about adoption by showing, because it's both sides, and it's the experiences that went along with it. And there's not a lot of outside voice. It's mostly just the narrative of the journey, and then some incredible uh, profound moments that I had in this last few years of writing. Things I went back and forth to Canada and Alaska. I did a lot of research. I went to the police. I tried to get police records. I went to court files. I went to microfiche. I went back and forth. I interviewed people. I went back to the adoption agencies. I did all these things trying to find out what really happened, like what really went on, because so much of it was hidden from me, and
Hmm.
much of it, like probably your birth mother and many other birth mothers, we push stuff down. because
Push
it's
it
just too
down.
painful. So
Yeah,
I don't know if you're a mom,
I
but
am.
imagine for a moment letting go of your child.
I've thought about that. Yeah, because I
I
am a
mean,
mom, and I've thought
okay,
about it. Yeah.
having your child taken from you, and nobody came to your door with a casserole. You never got a funeral. You never got a death certificate. Nobody asked you how you're doing because they assumed because you relinquished, you don't care. And it's shameful. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's
Mm-hmm.
you did the right thing,
You did the
and
right thing, and come back
it's
when you actually get pregnant for real with
and
your
you're
husband, and
actually
you're
worthy of
do it
being a
the right
mother. You're
way.
worthy.
Yeah. Come
Yeah.
back then.
So
Yeah.
yeah, there's so much shame, and then not just that, it's disenfranchised grief.
Mm.
It's grief that you can't talk about, that people don't talk about. Like divorce can be disenfranchised grief.
Mm-hmm.
You got so and so got divorced, but you don't know the grieving process that went behind that and the shame of certain things that happened. And this was disenfranchised grief that you could never really show it. And it was sort of like, I think I said in my book, it was sort of like, POWs or guys that came back from battle. Yeah, I lost a lot of friends over there. They don't talk
Yeah.
about it. Yeah, I lost a lot of
No.
friends over there. And we,
Yeah.
birth mothers, yeah, I had a girl. That's
And
about
that's
it.
it. Yeah. That's
And
a
I
great
had a girlfriend
comparison.
yeah, a girlfriend that relinquished. She was 17, and I knew she relinquished. We never talked about it. You just don't talk about it. You just don't. There's things you can't go, places you can't go. And so
Mm-hmm.
here we're showing up and wanting to know all the details, and these are places they can't go.
They can't go.
They
And
can't
I think that's what's
go.
going on with my birth mom. She just can't. I've come to that conclusion, and I give her grace because I just think
Tragic
she
on
just
both
can't.
sides. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in conclusion, one final question for you. Leave us a word for the birth moms. If you had anything to say to the birth moms, what would you say?
Well, I think it would be more global than just birth moms, because I think it goes both ways, and I think the main word that came out of my journey is compassion. So
Mm,
I had to understand why my adoptive mom did the things she did. I had to understand why my adoptive father did the things he did. I had to understand why I did the things I did. And if I went back and I did the research into their lives and what made them, act the way they did. And it's generally they had pain, they had trauma, they had something. And to have compassion for what they went through is so helpful. And for birth moms, they most of them don't want to address it and look at it.
mhm.
I'd say listen to adoptee voices, and the same for adoptees. Listen to birth mother voices. And I went in October to a cub retreat, Concern United Birth Parents. First time I was around birth parents, and it was overwhelming. The room was full of birth moms, and there was 100 or more of us. The grief in that room was I almost ran out
I
of
can
there. It
only
was so
imagine.
painful.
It was heavy, I'm
And
sure.
I was at a table with three young women who all relinquished open adoption. They were in their 20s, maybe early 30s, and there was somebody up front talking, and she was talking about the marketing that is done for birth parents and adoption agencies. And this is what I do for a living. This is what I do for a living, is sell software and marketing services, not for adoption agencies. But so I understand the technology. And what they will do is, because our phones, we have apps and they can track where we're going, so they can give us the ads we want or whatever. These women that are pregnant go into Planned Parenthood to look at their choices, and then
Mhm.
they're retargeted. Come, we have counseling. We'll help you. You have support. These are all done by adoption agencies. And these girls at this table were just sobbing because one was in nursing school in New York. She was in her 20s, early 20s when she got pregnant, was told that she could have an open adoption. She could still see her baby. Her daughter's 5 and it is slammed shut. She's now a nurse. She's employed. Another woman, similar circumstances, because it's up to the adoptive parents what they do.
Right.
And anyway, I settled down and I connected with a lot of birth moms, and there's a lot of voices out there. And for adoptees to try to understand is to listen to the birth moms' voices. There's videos coming out. There's podcasts. I was on a couple of them, and I think that's the biggest takeaway for healing, is to try to have some compassion by looking at the other side and to see what maybe they went through, what made them do the things they do.
And I normally don't do this, but I want to ask a question because of how you worded that. When you say compassion for what they went through, are you meaning adoptees from birth parents or or are you meaning both ways?
Always.
If the conversation comes up. Gotcha.
Always.
Okay, I just want to clarify that. Okay.
Because hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
And, like if I go back, I was extremely traumatized by my adoptive family. And I went back and I looked at why and what their lives were like and understood more why those things happened to me. And I was able to have some compassion. And it's a little different than forgiveness. They're two different things. And then my birth mother, I never, like I said with you, I didn't ever have, I just put her on a pedestal. Like, especially since she's dead. Like I could, she could be the most wonderful, virtuous person in the world now, right?
Right.
And I needed that. And the same with my birth father. He never came to see me at the hospital when he was called when I was born, and never got the right answers about that, and I never will. It's all complex, but the bottom line is there's so many tools for healing today. And if we want to, we can. I mean, I don't know that we'll ever heal. And I don't know that we're ever supposed to heal at all. I think that's why we're here.
That's a word right there. If you want to, the resources are there.
They
to assist you. That's a word right there. Sometimes people don't. Some people thrive in the hurt, and
it's a vicious cycle that happens.
Yeah.
The more you're surrounded by others with the same, the same narratives, you just keep the cycle going.
Cycle, for sure. Yeah.
And that's, I want to say, everybody has a destiny. And maybe that's their destiny. Who am I to judge?
Oh, that part, definitely. Who am I to judge? That's for sure. That's for sure. I totally agree with you there. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story and talking about your book. You all make sure you go and get the book. I will drop the link in the description. Click on the link, go get the book. Will you have your book on Audible?
Yeah. Oh gosh, you guys. I'm going to go record it.
Because I'm an Audible girl, so I'm going to need the Audible.
Yeah. But you won't get the discussion questions in the back or the sneak peek to the second book if you get the Audible. Because the second book, holy crap, the stuff that I couldn't put in this one, I mean, but I'm going to go record it or start recording on Friday. We'll see how it goes.
It's going to go amazing. I'm sending blessings your way. It's going to go amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you, and I can't wait to listen to the book.
Yes, I get you.
And on that note, bye, family. Hang on, Monica.
Journey on. You need a pie with the good? Oh yeah, what's the one?